Bam! There we are. We're live. At least I hope so. Welcome, everyone, to Casa Live, hopefully live. We've been gone for, I don't know, the better part of a month. At least it feels like it. It's definitely been at least 3 weeks or so. But welcome back, everyone, to Casa Live. We are here. I want to preface this with a big portion of us being gone really fell on me. I switched internet providers. I didn't have internet for a little while. It was kind of a back and forth ongoing thing, but I've got 1 gig fiber optic now. Whoa, 1 gig fiber optic. So internet is back. Casa Live is back. Trust me, Alex and Kristen who isn't here today. They were both like, "It's cool. We'll take a little break. Don't worry about it." But Kristen, if you're watching or when you tune in later on to check out the stream and how it went, we all hope that you're feeling better. She's a little under the weather right now and dealing with, all of that fun stuff. So we hope you get better soon. But we have Danielle Jones with us today. How you doing, Danielle?
Oh, hanging in there.
Hanging in there. Well, usually I do a big, hey, how are you? So I guess Danielle just keeps it real short and sweet for us. So
I mean, been real busy in After Effects video land for the past 2 months, but
you have been, and we get to see the fruits of all that labor later today.
Oh
yeah,
man,
excited. I hope everybody else is hyped. I think that's really why everybody else is here, right? Like that's why everybody. It's not for me and Alex. I mean, even though we both have glorious beards going right now. Alex, compliments on the glorious beard you have rocking right now. But that's not it. It's really the Truth About Vaping video, episode 4, that we'll be showing today. Live premiere for everybody. But Alex, hey, how are you?
Hey, doing all right. I got the house to myself this week, so I'm doing fun things like having ice cream for breakfast.
Nice. Was it like breakfasty ice cream, like a maple ice cream, or was it?
No, it was butter pecan, and it's keto friendly. And I had it after I had my waffle, which itself looks like some sort of dessert.
So it's like dessert for breakfast.
Pretty much, yeah. That's what I do.
That sounds amazing. I really want dessert for breakfast.
To be honest, it doesn't matter whether or not my wife is here. That's pretty much what I eat.
Adulting.
Yes, adulting. Fun stuff. Well, my week was okay. I was a little sick during the week, and then I ran it. I discovered that I'm not impervious to poison ivy this week. For a long time, I've been doing landscape and working outside for the better part of a decade now, and I've been in so many situations. Like I've ripped full flower beds out full of poison ivy barehanded before. Never had an issue with it. Always felt like I was just immune, impervious, young and invincible. But as Danielle Jones reminded me earlier today, that as we get older, things change and we become less and less invincible and impervious to things. But I've got ointment. I've got ointment now, and I'm fighting back, and it's doing well. My poison ivy is doing much better. So that's where we're at. We're back. Internet is good. Danielle Jones has fun to show us today. Alex's beard is looking fantastic. He had waffles and ice cream, and my poison ivy is going away. So I think that we're through all that. Yeah, that's all excellent news. I think that now we're through all that. It is time for a legislative rundown. Are you ready, Alex? All right, let's do this. All right, Alex, what do you have for us this week? Basically, I mean, we're catching up probably like the last, I don't know, month or so right now. What do you got for us? What do we need to know? What do we need to keep our eyes and ears on?
So I will sort of skip over a lot of the things that we've been talking about for multiple weeks before we kind of went on this unplanned break. So Maine still looking at LD 1550. That's a flavor ban. And I think there were a couple of other things, and we'll get back to that. But there are some things that have been introduced, and new issues to pay attention to. And I don't have a ton of graphics for these, or any, honestly. So you just get to look at the three of us while I talk about it. Take notes if you like, if you're playing the home game. So these are all sort of things that have popped up over the past month, and they are on our radar, but nothing's quite happening with them just yet. So I will start in Oregon. Found out about this last night. This is in Washington County. There is a proposal at the county level that would restrict sales of flavored products, including those products made with synthetic nicotine, to adult-only establishments. That's 21 plus. And it would also prohibit discounts. Of course, at the same time, all manner of cigarettes will be allowed to be sold in convenience stores. And so this is something that we're opposed to. I understand that a lot of folks may be inclined to accept this as a compromise, and in a lot of places this may be the only workable compromise, but there's no reason for consumers to bend over for this. And so we will eventually be putting up a call to action for this, encouraging people to oppose it. The introduction and first reading is on Tuesday. This is just introduction, just first reading, not a hearing yet. And I will, of course, be sharing the agenda. I think the agenda will eventually be linked in the description of the video. This is part of the links that I put together. So again, that's Oregon and Washington. That's Washington County in Oregon. Restrictions on flavored products and a discount ban. The next one, another county level ordinance that I'm sure I'm going to screw up the name. I want to say it's Mille, Millelacs, Mille County in Minnesota. This is a draft ordinance of a flavor ban, but it is moving to a public hearing. So September 7th, I believe that's a Tuesday, the regular county board meeting will be holding a public hearing on this ordinance. Flavor ban. That's what it is, flavor ban. Moving right along, Denver, Colorado, I think has been sort of in and out in discussions about banning flavors, continuing to discuss this and move forward. I believe over the past 2 weeks, 2 town halls were held. These are just town halls, and they were put on by sponsors of the ordinance that would ban flavors. I have heard varying reactions from that was horrible for tobacco control people, and it was horrible for vapor products. So I'm not really sure. I haven't gone back to watch any of them. I have a very limited amount of patience for some of this stuff. So that's the longer you do this, the more it hurts. But all of that to say, we are expecting introduction or a hearing or both, probably in September. So, within the next few weeks here. And we will have something up about that as well. The next city level issue here is in Columbia, Missouri, or Missouri.
Missouri.
Oh, I used to live there.
Well, your old hometown is looking to ban flavors. The city council received a report. It was a report on a flavor ban ordinance. I will have a copy to that report. And essentially it was the local board of health recommending more restrictions. So we're keeping an eye on that. It may or may not turn into a full-blown ordinance to be heard and voted on, etc. So again, Columbia, Missouri. Rounding out the group here, once again, back to the state of Michigan. The State Department of Health has sort of, I don't quite know how to say it. They haven't finalized the rule, but they are presenting something that I think you would consider a final rule to the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules, or JCAR. There's a lot of stuff in the document to read through and all of that, but the long and short of it is this is a flavor ban that the health department is proposing. Some folks who have been around for a couple of years may remember Michigan's, I'm going to get this mixed up, but this is something sort of at the behest of Governor Whitmer, I think in 2019, working through the Department of Health to propose this rule. and that was ultimately shot down by this same committee. So there is a little bit of confidence here that the JCAR or this committee will not. This isn't going to be easy to get through this committee, and so shortly here, I think probably within the next couple weeks, we will be issuing our call to action, encouraging people to contact members of the committee, and also sharing your stories widely. If you're the type of person that likes to write letters to the editor in Michigan, that would be a good idea as well. Sharing your experience with vaping and why flavors are important. And we are expecting some sort of decision. There are time limits as for how long JCAR has to, consider the rule and make a determination. And that determination can be reject, pass, or we need more information. And so we're expecting something along those lines to happen late September, early October. But again, probably within the next week or so, look for an engagement from CASA. And that pretty much ends the lightning round-esque reading of the legislative rundown. Any questions?
Logan, you're muted, I think.
It was muted. Excellent job breezing right through all of that. For anybody curious on catching up, we will have all the links in case you missed all of that because Alex is so lightning fast. We will have all the links to everything in the descriptions and things like that. We don't have an actual blog post this week. Again, Kristen is a little under the weather. So for all of your calls to action, obviously head right over to CASA.org. You can check out calls to action nationally, locally, state by state, whatever is going on in your state. Alex, can we show the clicky map? You want to show everybody the clicky map?
Yeah.
Just in case, we do have a clicky map over at CASA.org. So if if you live in a state, all you got to do is click on the state that you reside in, and you can see what is happening there. But yeah, we don't have a blog post this week, which is normally what we kind of link to directly in descriptions for everything. There's the clicky map. So yeah, if you wanted to check out Michigan, if you live in Michigan, boom, there you go. Check out calls to action. So everything that Alex just ran through, that's where it's all going to be. I just wanted to make sure that people had a place to go visually. They could see where all of our calls to action are right now and moving forward, always. CASA.org. Thanks, Danielle Jones, for making it look so beautiful. But there we go. Legislative rundown. Lightning round legislative rundown. Love it. All right. Is that all we've got this week then? We're ready to move swiftly forward.
Let's do some takes.
All right. Are you ready? I guess I'm ready. Here we go. It's a take two this week. Yeah. We didn't give Danielle homework.
Yeah, we don't make guests do homework.
But we also didn't make a brand new one of these. So it is a take two this week, not a take three, but I'm going to I'm just going to let Alex continue having the floor right now. And he can run with the first take this week. What do we got?
Cool. Well, I decided to, whine and complain about hold on, how do I get this back up here? Here we go. So we had 31 states AGs send a letter to FDA Commissioner Janet Woodcock, essentially demanding that FDA deny product applications for anything with flavors or high nicotine content, and also sounding an alarm about nicotine pouches. Probably, to me, I think one of the more humorous things, I mean, it's ridiculous. Maybe humor isn't the right word. One of the most ridiculous claims in this is the potential of nicotine pouches to become the new Juul. I don't know. They're discreet and people, when I first encountered people discussing nicotine pouches, especially like Zyn and On, the really thin pouches, people describe them as, like a nicotine patch for your gums, which is, in my experience, also kind of the level of like nicotine experience, the pharmacological effect of nicotine, the level of nicotine in pouches. Just remember, oral nicotine gets into your bloodstream slower. It gets to your brain slower. It doesn't cause that same rush that you get from a cigarette. And so it's a different experience for anybody who hasn't used them. But anyway, nicotine pouches are a very important product, and they're going to have to go through the same approval process that every other new nicotine product has to go to. So if this is just kind of a ridiculous letter, kind of telling FDA, like, do the job that Congress already told you to do and that you're in the process of doing. But there's a lot of kind of, sort of the typical wild claims that we hear from these folks, of course, leaning very hard on this idea that a generation of kids are being addicted to nicotine. And I sort of went through and just on my own, and I'm like fairly confident that I might have screwed this up. So anybody can jump in and give me like real numbers. But I looked at, let's see, where are we here? So this is a digest of education statistics from the National Center for Education Statistics. And I looked at, here's the estimated number of kids in high school, and this is what the AGs refer to in terms of youth use. Something, what was it in 2019 or 2020? We saw 19.6% of high school students using nicotine products at least once in the past 30 days. So that comes to 3.3 million high school kids out of, what do we got?
Around 15 million, I think.
Yeah, something like that. I had all these numbers. I think it was like 16.8 million in 2019 out of all students enrolled. It's like 56.4 million kids enrolled in school as of the fall of 2020, or that's the estimate. So just going through the numbers here and what they cite here, there was another study that I believe was commissioned by the Truth Initiative that showed 38.6% of that 19.6% used a tobacco product, or I think it was specifically e-cigarettes, 20 days or more in the last 30. So that's about 1.2, 1.3 million. And then again, of that 19.6%, 22.5% are considered daily users, which overall, if you're looking at the population of high schoolers, about 4.5% of high school students use vapor products daily. I'm not sure if that is totally correct, but it would be consistent with the dramatic decline in youth smoking that we've seen year over year, especially watching it go from, what was it, 9% down to 6%, something along those lines. And we've also seen research showing that of that 4.4%, around 1% or less are nicotine naive. They've never used any tobacco product. And so, again, one of the other things that I think will come up in our discussion later on is the article that we saw from the 15 former presidents of SRNT, basically calling for people to look at the youth use issue in balance, in context. And so if we're talking about only 4.4% of teenagers using vapor products on a daily basis, that's not an epidemic. It's below 5%. When we talk about reducing smoking rates to below 5% that's kind of the goal.
That was the point that I was just going to ask you that. When we talk about having, a smoke-free society or a country being smoke-free, that end game percentage is below 5%. So we're talking about the youth below 5%. Those are end game numbers.
Yeah,
right.
That's the goal.
So hardly an epidemic. And of course, like any good piece of propaganda that's written by a government official, they quote, of course, the U.S. Surgeon General, or refer to the U.S. Surgeon General calling it an epidemic in 2019. Also worth noting, that was the same Surgeon General that ridiculed people for wearing masks at the beginning of the pandemic. So not quite sure how much you want to trust his word on things. I know that some people are trying to repair that damage, but good luck. So yeah, anyway, the gist of this is nothing new. It's not anything that we've seen, that we haven't seen before from activists. Just because attorneys general signed their name to it doesn't mean that it's actually coming from them. And it's really just begging the FDA to not do science,
Right.
which is counter to everything that all of us have been asking for decades. We want these products to go through some sort of review. We want these products to be manufactured in sanitary facilities, which you may not get when you push them onto an underground market. And we want to have an adult conversation about substance use, addiction, and the role that pretty much any drug plays in a person's life, whether they're 15 years old or 55 years old. And so, unfortunately, these 31 attorneys general, which include an AG from Puerto Rico and an assistant AG from another state, are urging the FDA to not fulfill their mandate. So yeah, if you are interested in I don't know, burning out your retinas, the link to this letter will be available in the description below. But yeah. So the other thing is, and this is that's sort of my just synopsis of the letter. I think one of the things that we're seeing now is a bit of desperation from the anti-tobacco group. And I think actually as we go forward, there may be some need to separate the activists from tobacco control, because there are a lot of people in tobacco control that are starting to question all of this stuff and actually come around to reason, as evidenced by the letter from the 15 former presidents of the SRNT. This is a very activist-driven, talking point-laden letter. And I think what they're looking at here is the possibility of FDA actually doing their job and authorizing some products from market. I want to make sure everybody understands I'm just speculating. I don't actually have any insider knowledge about where FDA is. I don't know anybody that does. And so it's just, given our experience with this and all of the science that we've been promoting over the years, all of the experiences that we've been collecting over the years from people who've successfully switched, and FDA even defending the need for these products to stay on the market a little bit longer, that tends to tell me that we could see flavors other than tobacco approved, maybe not right away, but certainly if FDA is sticking to their guns about giving people, if they want to ban menthol cigarettes and give people a place to land, then some sort of mint or menthol vapor product has to be approved. Again, that doesn't necessarily justify banning menthol cigarettes, because people will find a way around that, which is potentially more dangerous. And of course, all of the social justice issues that come along with targeting people who smoke menthol cigarettes at disproportionately higher rates. You can refer to our comment about the menthol ban on our website. So, I think that sums up my take.
Yeah.
Bravo.
The longer all of this goes on, it feels like less of a scientific conversation and just more and more of a political one. It just feels like it's solely political at this point,
Yeah, I will say, and I don't want to be that guy who's like, well, I thought that before thinking that was cool. But it has sort of always been like that. And 2010 was New Jersey banned vaping indoors, and the justifications, the sort of the materials that were presented to the New Jersey State Assembly. At one point, they sort of pointed to some advertising that said, using this product is just like smoking. And so the activists were sort of like, see, they said it's just like smoking, so it's just like smoking. Like that's not a scientific conversation. That's absolutely all
exactly.
politics. And it's been that way since the very beginning. It's just now it seems like it's just more obvious. Like I mean, people who have their heels dug in, they've been red pilled about everything. They look at something like this and support it and cheer it on and say, yeah, like stick it to the tobacco companies. But there are other people who are critical thinkers who can spot this as, hyperbole. They're exaggerating the numbers. This is written in a way to make it alarming. And so I think, as you said, the longer this goes on, the more stuff that we see like this, the more obvious it becomes to more people that this is politics, not science.
Right. Yeah. All right. Excellent take, Alex. Excellent take. All right. I suppose that means it's my turn because Danielle didn't get any homework.
No.
Lucky Danielle. No, I'm just kidding.
I've been doing my own homework. You want to make a video?
No, I've made plenty, but yours are way better than mine ever were. This week, my take is on an article from Mark Gunther. This was published 3 days ago. The Great Vape Debate. Why do opponents of vaping want to suppress or dismiss science? We need to learn more, not less, about e-cigarettes. I'm not going to read this entire article, but I am going to kind of highlight a few things here just to kind of set the stage. It says one side, which I believe is a typo. We're going to go with on one side. Joanna Cohen, the Bloomberg Professor of Disease Prevention at the Bloomberg School of Public Health at Johns Hopkins University. That's a mouthful. She argued that journals such as Tobacco Control, where she is an editor, are right in refusing to publish research sponsored by the industry. What's more, she said, those who work in the industry, including at e-cigarette company Juul, should be prohibited from attending scientific conferences. I'm going to do my best to read today, you guys. I promise. Quote, scientists do not want their journals or their scientific societies to be used in the service of an industry that continues to perpetuate the most deadly disease epidemic of our time. Anybody want to chime in on that one? On the other side, Kenneth Michael Cummings, a professor at the Medical University of South Carolina. Cummings, a veteran of the tobacco wars who has testified in court against cigarette companies, nevertheless does not believe that they should be barred from journals or scientific meetings. This is my favorite quote of this entire article. Science ought to be judged by its merits, period, Cummings said. Censorship is not the way to go. Companies that make reduced risk products like e-cigarettes should be part of the solution to the public health threat posed by combustible tobacco. Watching online, I thought Cummings got the better of the debate. Obviously, they had a debate. Let's see here. This is a email sent from Cohen to Matt Myers of Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids. She said, good morning, Matt. I hope you and your family are well. I'm looking for an expert who can help me effectively respond to arguments about not allowing tobacco company research in journals and not allowing tobacco company employees to attend scientific conferences. Those in favor of tobacco company publishing conference attendance are calling the above policies censorship, and they talk about open science, quite powerful on the face of it. I thought you may be aware of people or companies who are very good at crafting message framing that resonates well and don't work for tobacco companies, or if you can recommend who I might ask. So we're reaching out to Matt Myers about how to, phrase or effectively respond to arguments.
Yeah, how to justify your opinion.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Justifying scientific censorship,
I know this is right and this is what we should be doing, but do you have anyone who's smart enough to come up with a reason why it should be that way?
Yeah. Can we get some words in here to make it to justify? Yeah, that's exactly what this is. And he goes on to say, do you see the problem here? Basically, that's what this comes down to. This comes down to scientific censorship. Again, I'm not going to read this entire article. It will be linked. So if you do want to go read this whole article, it's really not super long, but I don't want to go through the entire thing. This comes down to scientific censorship. And here at CASA, we've talked about this a number of times. And I believe Alex and I and Kristen have kind of touched base on this topic a few times during the show. But do we want scientific censorship just because of where that science comes from? Or should we accept all science and judge it based on its merits? How good the quality of the science is, whether it's, I always say this word wrong, replicatable I can't say that word, but
Replicable?
there you go. Whether it can be replicated, whether it's quality science, whether it's ethical science, or is it just solely based on conflicts of interest? Conflicts of interest are important to know. We should know where science is coming from, where people are getting their funding from, where those conflicts of interest rest. But quality science, good science, should be welcomed with open arms to any debate, whether we're talking about e-cigarettes, whether we're talking about drugs, whether we're talking about COVID-19, whatever the case may be. Quality science is important in order for us to expand our knowledge and move forward, whether that comes from tobacco companies or wherever. And I guess that's the question I will pose to kind of the rest of the panel, because that's my take, is that we should judge science based on its merits. And I guess I'll pose that same question. Should we censor science based on things like conflict of interest alone?
Absolutely not. I'll jump in here. No. There's actually a theory out there that industry science, especially in today's age, is more rigorously researched and done because industry knows that they will be under a much higher level of scrutiny than, let's say researchers from a public health university or something like that. So I would actually argue, I agree with you, science should be judged on the merits. It is important to know who has produced the science, where the funding comes from, if there are any conflicts of interest as a part of the larger context when looking at it, because sometimes those things matter. But also the methodology, if it's flawed, you've got potentially a bad study. But if methodology is good, if they're honest about the limitations, if it's good science, then no, it absolutely doesn't matter. And I would say that it is absolutely ridiculous to say that industry shouldn't be involved in conferences or shouldn't have studies published, because that is in fact the real world result of science, right? Companies putting out products that people on the planet use. That's who you want to have the science. That's who you want to be educated. That's who you want to be looking into this. If you've got a company putting out products and they're not allowed to have the latest science, who's to say they're not going to be making their product, more safe or more effective or whatever it is? I mean, that's like saying pharmaceutical companies shouldn't be allowed to attend science conferences because they're for profit. So they shouldn't have the latest science. Yet it's integral to what they're producing. It just makes no sense to me,
Right.
There can be good science that comes from industry. There can be bad science that comes from industry. There can be good science that comes from reputable organizations like researchers or the CDC. And there can also be bad science that comes from them as well. It's not, this one's good and this one's bad. Both sides can have both types. So I think the science itself is the most important thing.
Yeah. And like we discussed earlier, some of the bigger things to really, and me and Danielle agreed on this, we talked about this before the show, isn't not necessarily conflicts of interest, but limitations, methodology. Those are the things that we should really concern ourselves with when it comes to research. And again, conflicts of interest, things like that are important to know. We should absolutely have that available to us, but they are not the end all be all, where we should decide whether or not a research paper is good. Alex, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I obviously a few. I think we might have discussed this on a previous podcast. I attended that seminar with Michael Cummings and Joanne Cohen, and certainly had some thoughts about it. And I think this factored into, or this featured in our conversation about whether or not industry should be allowed to participate in as far as producing science. So the answer is unequivocally yes. The FDA requires these studies to be done. They require the manufacturers to pay for these studies. And as a consumer, if I can see that from my own eyes, I mean, even though I don't have the level of skill as other scientists and researchers might have, I still like having the opportunity to review it for myself. And the other thing that really bothers me is I don't know why more researchers and scientists aren't sort of mortally offended by this behavior of censoring, of sort of determining what they are allowed to see. Right. If I'm a scientist, well, it's science. I mean, it's about inquiry. It's about learning, and I I don't think that the editors of a journal are in any position to tell me what I can and can't read. I think it's very insulting to someone's intelligence. Basically, the editors of that journal or of journals that exclude research being done by certain industries are basically, they don't have any confidence in their readers to think critically and make up their own minds and assess the science on their own.
Oh, welcome to academia. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, which that's probably why I dropped out of college, because I'm just sick of everybody's crappy attitude. The other thing is, I don't know what the point of conflicts of interest, declaring conflicts of interest, is, if that's simply being used to exclude certain authors.
Right.
If I understand that there have been incidents and recent incidents where you have authors on a particular article that failed to disclose past funding from tobacco companies, which is something, of course, I feel that can be remedied very easily with some sort of editorial note. If you are so concerned that someone will sort of read 2/3 of the way through, I guess, the abstract, which is what most of us have access to, unless you use Sci-Hub, and then they will be somehow possessed by the devil and not able to think for themselves, then put that disclosure at the top. This person was received an unrestricted grant to do science on behalf of tobacco companies. Fine, whatever.
20 years ago.
Yeah, 20 years ago or yesterday. I don't care when they got the money.
Right.
Did they do the science? Is it science? Is it science, or is it propaganda? And yeah, I think, just to echo the comment by Mike Cummings, I think that you either read, or I just have it stuck in my head, was, it wasn't the lack of access to tobacco company research that got public health into trouble in the first place, going all the way back to light and low tar cigarettes. That the research around light and low tar cigarettes was very limited, and of course, tobacco companies showed what they wanted to show. It was what public health officials didn't see that led to the problem of public health officials saying, "Oh yeah, light low tar cigarettes are better than regular cigarettes," which they're not. So yeah, anybody who's doing research in science, I think, should be outraged at the fact that journal editors are keeping certain information from them. And I would, as much as it is possible, I would love to see researchers poring over, PMTA applications, which are actually very difficult to get a hold of. And when you do get them, they are heavily redacted for, protecting trade secret and stuff like that. But in terms of the research, we absolutely need that out in the open. I don't care if tobacco companies do it or not. FDA is reviewing it. I want the other researchers to review it, replicate it. Let's confirm this stuff. We all want to know what the safer alternatives to smoking are. We all want better strategies to reduce the early death and disease attributable to smoking. Keeping people in the dark isn't helping that.
Absolutely. I think you just said it best. So that's it. Those are our takes this week. Are you ready, Danielle? Are you prepared?
Oh,
I'm sweating bullets in this office right now. I don't know if anybody has noticed, but I'm dying in this office right now. But Danielle, if you're ready, then it is time for this week's deep dive. This week's deep dive is really just brought to all of us by this wonderful human being right here, Miss Danielle Jones. What are we about to see, Danielle?
You are about to see episode 4, which, by the way, I only make episodes every, 2 years. I'm not a good YouTuber. But I've been working on this one for the last 2 months. I started at the end of June, and it was based on things that were happening, as you will see in the video, that I think a lot of people in our community and in our space are not really paying attention to, in terms of it's about Juul. And I think that there is a potential for these events to affect us, but not a lot of people are aware of that. So I decided to do a video explaining that. It did take 2 months. It was a hardcore labor of love, but it's done, and I'm really excited for people to see it. Also, sorry, not sorry that I only make videos every like 2 years. So they're a lot of work, you guys.
They're well worth the wait. I am prepared to wait until 2024 or 2025 even for the next. No, I don't want to wait that long. Either way, this is fantastic, and I'm ready to hit this button. Can I hit this button?
I think, yeah, in chat, if there's any audio issues or anything, let us know right away.
Yeah, please let us know right away.
We've done testing. This should work properly for the live premiere.
All right. Is everybody ready?
Yes.
Truth About Vaping, episode 4. Here we go. I'm going to mute everybody. Danielle's muted officially. Alex is officially muted.
Settled a lawsuit with the state of North. Most of you have probably seen or heard that e-cigarette maker Juul just settled a lawsuit with the state of North Carolina for $40 million. North Carolina filed their suit in May of 2019, and as of the making of this video, there are currently 14 other attorneys general suing Juul, as well as thousands of lawsuits across the country with plaintiffs ranging from individuals to cities and counties to school districts to Native American tribes. There are so many lawsuits, it's hard to keep track, so the courts consolidated many of them into an MDL docket, or multi-district litigation, under one judge in San Francisco. The majority of the cases are filed by individuals, but the second largest group of plaintiffs comes from school districts. The MDL lists 155 school districts from states all over the country. Interestingly, some of these schools don't even track how many of the students vape, if they use Juuls, or what damages they should claim.
It is a complicated formula, so it's my understanding from the law firms that they, with respect to Juul, because they are the largest manufacturer of e-cigarettes, they represent a certain percentage, I'm just guessing, say 80% of the manufacturing of e-cigarettes. And so our damages allegedly would be calculated based on 80% of our infractions. It's hard to also track internally because, like you said, we don't have a system and first of all, we don't track between traditional tobacco products and e-cigarettes. And not only that, but we also don't calculate to the manufacturer of each of the cigarettes, of the e-cigarettes. So yes, that's part of the formula.
Yet they've been persuaded to sue Juul by powerful litigation attorneys who stand to make lots of money in cases like these. Of the 155 school districts, over 90% of the schools are represented by just 6 attorneys. By all accounts, it appears that everyone sees suing Juul as easy money, including anti-vaping advocates. In a recent panel from the Public Health Law Center, tobacco control activists reflected on the master settlement agreement reached in 1998 and how that could be relevant today.
I guess it's my hope that there is a future settlement agreement with the e-cigarette industry as a whole, if not just specific companies.
If you're wondering how this relates to the Juul lawsuits, let's back up for a moment. Beginning in the 1950s, there were decades of unsuccessful lawsuits against tobacco companies. In the 1990s, states' attorneys general tried a new tactic and began suing tobacco companies to recover Medicaid and other health-related costs, which proved successful. After individually settling with 4 states, the tobacco companies eventually agreed to one large settlement that would cover the remaining 46 states, known as the Master Settlement Agreement, or MSA. The MSA is still the single largest civil litigation settlement in U.S. history because it requires the participating tobacco companies to pay the states a portion of their revenue every year, forever. As of 2020, tobacco companies have already paid over $160 billion. These mandatory MSA payments resulted in an increase in cigarette prices, and through the MSA, tobacco companies agreed to marketing and advertising restrictions, releasing millions of internal documents, and providing initial funding for what is now the Truth Initiative, one of the largest and most active anti-tobacco organizations in the country. The year after the MSA was signed, the federal government sued the tobacco companies under a civil RICO statute. RICO stands for Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations and was an act passed in the U.S. which allowed for more severe criminal and civil penalties for crimes committed as part of an ongoing criminal enterprise. The government ultimately won this case, which required the tobacco companies to, among other things, issue corrective statements about the health effects of smoking. The MSA money tobacco companies pay is supposed to be used to combat smoking and offset increased health costs, but as many tobacco control activists will tell you, it's largely not. States typically use the money for their general fund on things like shipping docks, golf courses, and jails. Tobacco control activists spend a significant portion of their time lobbying state governments to give the money to them, but they're not as successful as they'd like. Since the advent of vaping, these activists have been suggesting that vapor companies should also be forced into a similar type of settlement, perhaps an MSA 2.0, likely due to the dwindling funds available to them as smoking continues to decline in the United States. If they could require vapor companies to pay and funnel some or all of that money to themselves, they'd have a secure funding stream for their organizations and jobs.
I would advocate for an approach like the MSA. Yeah, as I said before, we have been able to take on e-cigarettes. We're lucky, but the way the MSA is constructed, the main money coming from it is gone, and money isn't coming from the e-cigarette flow. So we'll be able to do it for a little while, but without new funds, that's work that's going to be difficult to continue.
The avalanche of lawsuits drowning Juul, coupled with the recent ruling by the San Francisco judge that plaintiffs can move forward with civil RICO allegations, is starting to look very familiar. The RICO claims will make a settlement much more likely, since if Juul loses, the amount of money they pay in damages is tripled, per the RICO statute. Like with the MSA, tobacco control activists know that the best possible outcome for them involves not just Juul settling, but other vape manufacturers as well.
Some of the elements, if you could come up with sufficient incentives to get new players in the market to become participating manufacturers, which has been one of the barriers in the cigarette market. The functions of the MSA would be really good to apply to e-cigarettes.
Why would other vape companies sign on to a settlement when they weren't being sued? To answer that question, let's look back at the original MSA. The MSA was an agreement between 46 U.S. states and initially only 4 tobacco companies. These companies had to raise the price of their cigarettes to compensate for the loss of money, and they argued that this would give their competitors an unfair advantage in the market. So the MSA was written with a clause that allowed tobacco companies to give the states less money if they lost market share to cheaper competitors. This created a strong incentive for the states to help make sure that didn't happen, so they were encouraged to pass legislation requiring any tobacco company who wanted to sell in their state to either join the MSA or make payments to the states, resulting in higher cigarette prices, effectively leveling the playing field. As further incentive to join, these subsequent tobacco companies only had to pay the states if their market share increased beyond a preset level. 41 additional tobacco companies have since signed on to the MSA. Encouraging or extorting additional tobacco companies into joining the MSA was a win-win for both sides. The original 4 tobacco companies wouldn't have an unfair disadvantage in the marketplace, and the states would receive the highest payments possible and be able to restrict the activities of as many tobacco companies as possible.
There's so much litigation against Juul right now from individuals, from states, from tribes, and so it certainly seems like it's creating a situation where a larger settlement might be on people's minds.
Many people are anticipating that Juul will receive an approved pre-market tobacco product application, or PMTA, from the FDA this fall, which would permit them to continue selling their products legally in the U.S. It is not outside the realm of possibility that Juul would be open to signing an MSA 2.0 to make this litigation go away and avoid RICO charges. If tobacco control activists were able to insert themselves into these negotiations, just like Matt Myers of the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids did with the original MSA, they may try to engineer a way to pay themselves. Tobacco control activists have already produced materials suggesting that the Truth Initiative is the organization that should receive a large portion of any settlement money, even though most of these lawsuits are still in the early stages. So what does the future of vaping look like? If there is an MSA 2.0 for vapor products, small businesses, if they could even afford to file a PMTA and are approved, will likely be shut out of the market unless they can also afford to sign on to the settlement. The PMTA process, coupled with an MSA 2.0, would skyrocket the price of whatever products legally remain on the market, offering an even larger incentive for a thriving underground market. Everyone involved in these lawsuits, and even those who aren't, seem to have their eyes on only one prize: money. There is no consideration of the fact that vapor products are helping people quit smoking, and that an MSA 2.0 would ultimately increase prices and restrict information about less harmful alternatives to smoking, hurting public health. The secret, hiding in plain sight, is that none of this is about public health. It's about feeding the tobacco control industrial complex.
Claps.
There you go. That's
Excellent.
2 months of my life.
Excellent. 2 months in 10 minutes. Beautiful. Well done. First of all, compliments to the chef. That was just that. It's so good. I've watched it like 4 times now. It's so good. Just wow. Just wow. My first question is, I guess, how do I want to phrase? I should have thought this out first. Alex, do you have a question? Because I'm still trying to phrase it correctly in my mind. Or do you have comments out of the gate?
Yeah, I don't have a question, but mostly the comment, because it's that 80% rule that they have about how like Juul has 80% of the market share, and so 80% of the vaping infractions in schools are just magically attributed to Juul.
Yep.
People have probably seen, I know Stefan Didak has posted pictures, and I think other people have posted pictures of like, there's shots of like the desk of the school principal, and there's like a bunch of vapor stuff, and like you can pick out what's cannabis and you can pick out what's Juul, and then like everything else is something different. It's ridiculous. Courtrooms, and as we noted when I was talking about the AG's letter, they reference science and math, but it really has no bearing on reality in a courtroom.
No, I mean, you saw that woman of the school board say they don't even track this information. They have no data as to whether or not their students are even Juuling. Yet they're going to go ahead and sue Juul and try to collect money.
Yeah, and whenever you see it's the e-cigarettes, the vapes, all that laid out on the principal's desk, this is standard like drug propaganda, drug bust, photo op opportunity. It's the same thing. Instead of little baggies and 520s fanned out in front of them, it's 2 packs of Juul pods and a bunch of e-liquid bottles. My favorite. And I always question it. My favorite, though, in those photo ops are the unopened e-liquid boxes. When I'm like, did they, like, what teenager or whoever doesn't immediately, open it up, discard the box, and throw it in their bag or their pocket or whatever? It's like, do we just need to fill that corner of the desk before we took the photo? Was that what happened here?
Well, my alternate explanation for that was that it's probably because they just bought it from another student. So they just
like right in school,
to take it out of the box.
Didn't have time. Damn. Well, either way, I always question it because I'm always like, really? Like the cellophane on my cigarette pack was never there when it got confiscated from me. Like that was always long gone.
Actually, I do want to just really quickly, I've seen some comments. There were some people who had to cut away and a couple folks who might have joined late. This video will be available. Obviously, you can go back and watch this podcast, but it is on Danielle's YouTube channel, which is The Truth About Vaping. So
I'm launching it Monday. So Monday morning is when the video is actually going to go live. I greatly encourage you to share it from that particular link specifically. Please watch it. It helps my analytics and gets me recommended in the YouTube algorithms. But yeah, my actual video will be published Monday morning. This is like the early sneak peek. So if you missed it, you can rewatch it on this replay, or you can wait until Monday and see it on my channel. And I'm in chat with my channel, so it's easy for you to subscribe. I'll say something right now. Hi. So click that subscribe link. I did see a question
I'm gonna encourage
from Ian
everybody.
Thomas.
Ian Thomas, I will find your question, but I am going to encourage everybody to just like take 2 seconds right now and just go subscribe to the Truth About Vaping YouTube channel. We'll take 2 seconds while I find Ian's comment here. Ian, where are you? Where are you, Ian?
He was a YouTube comment and asked a good question that I kind of want to clarify for people because I think I saw another question. He said, wasn't MSA to settle for medical costs to the states due to smoking?
Oh,
yes.
I did see this while we were watching.
How in the hell does that apply to vaping? So here's one thing that I want to make really clear for everybody. The MSA is in effect a settlement for lawsuits. It is not a law. It is not a congressional bill. It is nothing like that. It is an agreement between several parties for what these parties are willing to do for each other. And so because this kind of settlement comes from lawsuits, the lawsuits can be about anything, right? And so people are suing Juul for all kinds of things. There's tons of personal injury cases, people claiming that, bad things happened to them after using a Juul or that they became addicted because they used a Juul. So there's a ton of individual personal injury cases. And then there's also the school districts, like I said, the Native American tribes, and they're suing based on their supposed vaping infractions to students and things like that. So a settlement can come from a lawsuit suing about anything. You know what I mean? They don't have to prove medical damages like the states did with smoking before. It can be any lawsuit for any reason that results in a settlement. And that's how this can happen, essentially. And like I said, it could wind up having far-reaching consequences for the rest of the industry because there is incentive for, if Juul were to doing this, for Juul and for the tobacco control people to get more people to voluntarily sign on to this settlement, even though they weren't being sued, because then they can do things that by congressional law or bill they cannot do. So, for example, the MSA limited advertising and marketing on the tobacco companies. A law or a bill could not have done that. They could not have passed that through Congress because that would violate the company's First Amendment rights. But it could be accomplished in a settlement because essentially cigarette companies voluntarily agreed to do that. And so there are things that can get done in settlement contracts that cannot be done by law. And that's why the tobacco control activists like them so much. And that can be the danger in something like this because other tobacco companies who weren't sued were essentially kind of blackmailed in a way to sign on to this agreement. Otherwise, the states would charge them money anyway, or other things of that nature. So that's how this can kind of snowball out of control. Even though these are lawsuits against Juul, there is a potential for it to have far-reaching consequences outside, depending on what happens.
I sort of had a question about that, and I sort of questioned my own experience around the time that the MSA came into effect. Because that was, mid 90s. I was full blown 2-pack a day, well, sometimes 3-pack a day smoker. But what did, if how did the MSA settlement and this kind of requirement or not really the bullying to get other companies to sign on to it, did that have any effect on the variety of cigarettes that were available?
Not to my knowledge, not really, because so many other companies signed on to it, essentially. And so what they did, there's this really long clause in the MSA that, like I said in the video, it allows, because the 4 tobacco companies that were sued, and they've since, kind of recombined. So it's a little, Brown and Williamson, I think, is no longer a thing anymore. They were initially part of the initial lawsuit. It was Reynolds, Philip Morris, all of these guys eat each other and, marry and create different subsidiaries and whatnot. But essentially, they themselves had about 97% of the market share domestically anyway. And so their concern about this was that if they had to up their cigarette prices, that 97% of the market that they already had would lower because everybody would buy the cheaper cigarettes, right? That's the idea. And so this was basically price fixing in a way, or it was essentially like competitor, fixing to make sure that they maintain that market share, because that's where most of that money comes from, is those initial 4, guys. So my understanding is that it didn't really have a huge effect on availability, because they're the big ones anyway, those 4 initial guys. And then everybody else, the 41 other companies agreed to the same thing. So they were still allowed to sell in the state. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. And as I'm sort of remembering that period of time, I mean, it's really between, 96 until 2009, 2010. I remember there were really cheap brands of cigarettes like Basic and Sundance. I haven't bought cigarettes in 8 years now. Is that right? Yeah, 8 years. So I don't really know. And even, while I was smoking in the last kind of 10 years there, I wasn't really interested in the cheap cigarettes. But I don't remember seeing them so much. So I was sort of curious, but, which was it, the Tobacco Control Act or the MSA that knocked out those smaller companies?
It could have been either one. Like I said, I'm sure there may have been a few smaller companies that didn't want to sign on to the MSA or pay the states, so they may have stopped distributing in the US market, especially if it wasn't a huge market for them or something of that nature. But yeah, the way that they wrote this clause and this the pages that I flipped through in the video is this thing called the model statute in the MSA. And it is essentially a pre-written law that states they weren't required, but they were strongly encouraged to pass this piece of legislation that was pre-written for them. Like, just enter your state's name and pass this law. And that's what said, like, any tobacco company that wants to sell in here that isn't one of the 4 that we sued already has to either also agree voluntarily to the MSA, or we're going to create a separate little thing where they have to pay us anyway. And we put it into this weird fund where we reserve the funds for in the event that we decide to sue them later too. Like, it was this very bizarre thing for possible future litigation that didn't even exist yet, but would essentially have the same effect of requiring them to pay the states. And so these companies were like, well, I either have to pay that or I could sign on to the MSA. And the bonus, there was like a 90-day bonus where if you sign on in the first 90 days, you won't have to pay any additional, you won't have to pay the states unless your market share increases above your current, 90s level. Like, it was crazy the way that they did this. And it was all to essentially ensure that these 4 companies who were sued and who were going to pay the states would maintain their market share. I mean, it's just
right,
a little,
because they're going to pay in perpetuity. We want these 4 to remain, the top dogs who are going to keep paying us forever.
Right.
And that's kind of going to tie, I guess, into it's not so much a question, but I guess an observation where we have we have activists who are simultaneously, lobbying and things to get the FDA to deny PMTAs, all this sort of stuff, and essentially trying to shut down the vapor industry, and then simultaneously trying to work on this MSA 2.0. If you shut down the industry, you're not going to get an MSA. You're not going to get money.
Correct.
So this is kind of one of those situations, just like with the MSA, where like, yeah, we're gonna fight them, but we also need them.
It's an interesting, I mean, I can't definitively tell you why they're doing this,
right? Like, that's just kind of as an observation. It's like,
but I can speculate, right? And so to your answer, the weird thing about this, right, is that creating the MSA essentially made everybody reliant on cigarette sales, right? For funding, for all of this stuff. And so you're like, you're evil, but I need you around because you pay me, you know? And it's kind of the same thing that they're trying to create with e-cigarettes, right? With the vapor industry. If this is truly what they want, this MSA 2.0, which it sounds like they do need, for example, Juul to get a PMTA, right? And other vape manufacturers to get a PMTA. Otherwise, this is moot. So it is bizarre. It would seem bizarre that they are sending all these letters and saying, no, don't give them a PMTA, and don't do this. But on the other hand, they also really want an MSA. Is this
just like, do you think this is like the plan B, like the fallback? Like, we're going to keep fighting, but...
Yeah, I think it's a play both sides situation, right?
Right. Like
try to get
it
banned.
Either way, we're going to try to come out victorious.
But also,
here.
Right, if we can't get it banned, then we want the money, right?
Right. Like, if we can't have it our way, we're going to have it our way.
Right. Or who knows? It might even be, more ridiculous than that. And they're just doing all of these letters and pressuring the FDA as like a PR stunt. Like, look at us. We look like we're trying to save the children, but really past it, we want the money. Like, I don't know which it is, but the evidence
Probably
is
a
all
good
there,
mix of
so,
all
like,
of that. Like it all just sounds like it works in their favor. So you could kind of just close your eyes and throw a dart at it,
right.
and it works in their favor. That's the end goal, right? Like that's what a strategy. Create a situation where you can't lose.
It's a win. Yeah, it's a win-win either way,
Yeah.
right?
Well, I mean, for everybody except for people who smoke.
Right. For
Right.
totobacco
Situation for
control
people who
and
smoke.
states, yeah.
Yeah, you lose. You're gonna lose.
The
but,
public health loses. The real,
Right.
and that was
Yeah.
my point at the end of the video, is that, all of this crying and marketing and complaining that they do, in public, these campaigns, is about, and I feel like I kind of coined this term, feeding the tobacco control industrial complex, right?
That's exactly what it is.
Because this is a business, right? These are
Yeah.
organizations with employees and, they need funding. This is a business for them. And if smoking and all nicotine products were just to magically vanish tomorrow, it is true that they would be out of jobs, right? They'd have nothing else to do. And so there is an element of like an economy here that I think
Right.
even tobacco controllers today who are seeing the light and who are, being more receptive to vaping are still kind of loath to admit that this is in fact a bit of an industry in and of itself. I understand that they feel that it's pure and that it's righteous and all of this stuff, but at the bottom line, there's economics to this, and I think that needs to be recognized as well.
Yeah, so righteous, getting to heaven on the backs of, cancer patients and. Anyways, and I did want to, kind of highlight, like I didn't get the name of the individual who said it, but he even clearly states like that money from the MSA is kind of drying up as we see, percentage of people in this country who smoke plummeting rapidly since the adoption of e-cigarettes and safer alternatives. That money is dwindling.
So that was David.
Need that new source. They need that new revenue. Like you said, these people have jobs. They, this is their income.
Right.
Where does that money come from? Well, we have a brand new category to target here, which just so happens, thanks to FDA, to also be a tobacco product to target, to ride on the coattails of.
Yeah, so that was David Dobbins of the Truth Initiative. Hopefully everybody saw that. So that's Truth, right? Truth Orange. And one of the things that sometimes people get a little wrong or confused about. So the Truth Initiative, when it initially came into being, was actually called the American Legacy Foundation. That foundation was funded initially by the MSA money. So there was a clause in the MSA that I think it was the first, 3 to 5 years, the tobacco company, the MSA money would fund that organization. They morphed into the Truth Initiative after they had their Truth campaign that became really popular. And they do not currently receive MSA money or tobacco money, but they were initially started with it. I think I read somewhere that they actually invested some of that money, that initial funding from the MSA, really well in like the stock market and stuff. And so they've been able to like continue their work based on, some of that investment income and stuff like that. And also I'm sure they get donations like any other nonprofit does. But yeah, that was the Truth guy talking. I just want to make sure everybody knows where that came from. That is the guy from Truth Initiative.
Just spelling it right out there,
Right.
Hey, we're running out of money. So, it
and
seems like a really good idea.
There's no money coming from the e-cigarette flow. So we need it, and I'm just, man. Okay.
Yeah. Look at all that money sitting over there. We're just going to try to get some of that. Yeah.
I mean,
well, excellent job. Alex, you look like you have something to add here.
I was just gonna say, wow, what a dilly of a pickle.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I don't know. It'll never cease to amaze me how, Matt Myers, Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids, this whole situation where really, like, even though it's all based on just bullshit, really, right? How smart and like thought out that situation is to just trying to force that win-win, right? Like you either shut your opponents down or you win by, extorting money from them. Like, How do we do that?
if you
How do
operate,
we do that? Can we
Yeah.
take some of that playbook, but do
So
it like better and the right
look,
way with
here's
you know.
here's the deal. We've already won. That's the thing
Yes.
that I think a lot of these folks, I mean, if we set our goals too high, then yeah, we're on the losing side of this, because we're seeing people have these products taken away from them. They're losing access to the products and the information about safer alternatives. And ultimately that means that fewer people are trying to quit. And so that is ultimately the big loss here for everybody involved. But from the vaping side of things, we've already won because vaping democratized nicotine. These products will continue to be manufactured if the industry or the community, really, if the community has to go back to making small batches of e-liquids in their homes. You have people who are very talented at machining things. The mods will continue to be made. They'll continue to be ordered from China. The liquids will continue to be made. All of these things will still happen. We just won't get the benefit on a large enough scale. So it's kind of like, this is where the whole harm reduction thing comes into this. Harm reduction works because you have to start by acknowledging that people are doing these things.
Sure.
And
I mean, if you look back at the history of,
we're just never going to be in a position of shutting that down. And again, this gets into the whole, like, what is an acceptable level of youth experimentation, youth use, et cetera. Well, it's not so much really of what is an acceptable level, it's what is the level, and what is the level in spite of all of these coercive strategies that people have tried over the decades and centuries. What is the level? And that is never going to be zero. So sure. I think, we can either win by walking through the blood, which is what this group of lawyers is trying to put on us, or we can all walk down the path together and work cooperatively to make sure that people have access to quality information and high quality products that aren't going to kill you in your 50s or 60s.
Yeah. And I was going to highlight like you said, harm reduction. If you look at the history of syringe exchanges, they started out of the trunks of people's cars, in parking lots and alleys. And still today, there are people that do outreach programs where they literally go out to the field and set up, syringe exchange spots, whether they're handing out, clean needles or other drug supplies, cookers, things like that, first aid, all that kind of stuff. And that's where it started. And we've gotten to a place now where in a lot of places, syringe exchange programs are just part of the medical normalcy. I don't know what word to use there, but it's just part of everything else. So yeah, I guess like that's the ultimate goal, right? Is to have this just become the norm, that they're legal, they're available to adults, harm reduction. You can quit smoking this way. That's the ultimate goal. We're like, we were moving towards that. We're kind of falling back to the trunk of the car thing, but hopefully we can get back to, getting back to that being a normal, the norm, I guess we'll say.
And I would say that really ties into, this big paper that we saw come out this week, right? With the 15 former presidents of the Nicotine Society and that sort of thing. I think that, like Alex said earlier in the broadcast, nobody knows for sure what the FDA is going to do. Like, I'm just going to put that out there. We have no insider knowledge, but there is a lot of speculation that FDA is going to potentially grant something, right? And Juul is at the head of the pack, so perhaps it's going to be them. But there's sort of this, something in the air that says that perhaps they're going to get a PMTA, which would, work nicely into this little, MSA type scheme that is currently being developed. And that there are tobacco controllers, out there who think that this is a good idea for, Juul to be given a PMTA, that it should be, known that e-cigarettes are, good for public health, right? And so I think that was interesting too. One could speculate as to whether or not, these tobacco controllers were potentially giving FDA some like cover or some, good PR to then go forth and, approve a couple vaping PMTAs or something, saying, look, other people, we're not just out here by ourselves, the only ones saying that actually vaping's not terrible. I don't know if you guys have thoughts about that, but.
Well, I mean, globally, there are a number of institutions that also echo the same sentiments.
Yeah, I think if timing is a factor in that theory, I don't think that necessarily holds in terms of like giving the FDA cover. I think, to be honest, I think that this letter, this report from the 15 former presidents of SRNT, the Society for Research on Nicotine and Tobacco, I think it's really speaking at the rest of the tobacco control community, or speaking to the rest of the community, not so much directed at FDA, but at everyone who might consider themselves to be a part of tobacco control. It's my understanding that this actually took quite a while to put this report together, and so the timing, this coinciding with the letter from the AGs and everything sort of we haven't quite reached a fever pitch yet. But it is sort of nearby in terms of timeline, with all of the ramping up of advocacy that we've seen from the anti-groups lobbying FDA to ignore science. So I don't know. Maybe it will have that sort of effect as a sort of coincidentally, or this incidental words. You know what I'm trying to say, though. I don't know if we had stated this in the press release, but we've certainly said this before. Since we did invoke this report, now is the time for people who identify themselves as tobacco control to speak up, get off the fence. There are millions of people who need your help, and we need you to follow the science and not the hyperbolic rhetoric about substance use.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, do we have any final thoughts on any of this today before we ship out of here?
My final would just be that, my point is that I think people invested in this space should be paying attention to these lawsuits, should, perhaps set up some Google alerts for the Juul lawsuits, especially the ones in the MDL in San Francisco. Keep an eye on what's happening. We did see one settle already when I was in the middle of making the video. I believe Juul settled. Yeah, I said it for $40 million with North Carolina, right? So there's one. So that did not result in any kind of weird MSA situation. But, these civil RICO statutes can be scary for Juul, right? Because those have very hardcore penalties. And I think we ought to pay attention to what's going on with this. I think me especially, before I wasn't really paying attention to the Juul lawsuits because I was like, oh, that's Juul. They're being sued. Whatevsies, but this could matter. And so one of the things that I would say is keep an eye out for this, follow it, see what's going on, see what happens, follow if Juul's going to get a PMTA, follow if there's talks of some giant settlement, see what, kinds of things are going into that. That's my 2 cents.
Alex?
I don't think I have much to add except for to echo everything that Danielle has said and underscore, this is much bigger than just one company. And it will have, I think, a dramatic effect on not only people's access to the products, but people's understanding of the products. And I don't exactly know how to stop this train. They seem to have hedged their bets pretty well. It's just going to make it a lot more difficult for people to quit smoking.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to just thank Danielle Jones here for the excellent job on that video. Your 2 months worth of hard work and research. Seriously, just excellent job. Well done. Please, everybody, earlier in the chat, I did drop a link to the Truth About Vaping YouTube channel. So please, if you have not yet subscribed, please go subscribe. Like Danielle said, she'll be making that video live for everybody on that channel Monday. That's definitely the video to share. If you missed any of that video, you can still view it here. Please share this stream as well. Feel free to. We absolutely would encourage that. But that's definitely going to be the video to share literally everywhere. Just send it to random phone numbers. But share it everywhere that you can, because it's excellent. It's well done. It's information that we can all use. And thank you to everybody here today. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for hanging out with us today here on CASA Live. Apologies again.
Back.
Yeah, thanks for coming back. I was just going to say, apologies again about us being gone for a little while. Most of that is my fault. You guys can blame me. I understand. I've got broad shoulders. I can take it. But thank you, everybody, for being here. We definitely appreciate it. If you have not yet signed up to become a member of CASA, what are you waiting for? Why?
Bro,
what are you doing?
It's free. What are you doing?
Do it. It's free. Head over to CASA.org. You can sign up. It's free. Become a member. Also, while you're there, we would absolutely love it and encourage you to share your personal story on our testimonials page. You can do, I think Alex has got it all right here. Yeah, boom. Look at that. Super interactive. Look at that. Look at that beautiful website. Well done, Danielle.
Oh, thanks.
But please, yeah, absolutely encourage everyone to share their testimonies. We have thousands and we need millions more. So head over to CASA.org. Again, you can head over to the clicky map to get involved, check your state, see what calls to action we have up. All the links and everything discussed here on this program today will be available in all the descriptions. And for SoundCloud listeners or podcast listeners, there will be two versions of this podcast that go out. There will be a full version and a quick little legislative rundown, short snippet version where you can just get all the need to know stuff right out of the gate. Short, sweet, to the point, so that way we can all be the best advocates and activists that we can be. And I guess that's where we're going to wrap this week up. That's it. That's all I've got. Anybody else? No, we're good. All right. Thank you guys. Stay safe out there, and we will see you guys next week. Bye, everybody.